As you guys know, I just got done looking at Steam reviews for recent fighting games. And one thing I noticed is, specifically, I only saw this as an issue on Mortal Kombat and on Tekken 8. But one thing I noticed is that for some reason, people seem to really value balance in a fighting game, and patching and making sure that things aren't overtuned or undertuned, which to some degree is very important. I've even seen the same sentiment when it comes to Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising. Had a recent patch after the Arc World Tour Finals, which is good, and some people, even bigger names that I don't really want to just throw out, are saying the patch didn't do enough. You can look up Anime Illuminati for yourself and see what he thought about the patch. Some people believe that the patch wasn't enough, and that those changes should have been in the game since day one, that those things should have never existed. Have we become too jaded and accustomed to patches that we cannot understand a game in its vanilla state and adjust accordingly? People have been playing the same game of Super Smash Bros. Melee, for the most part, there's the PAL and the NTSC versions, for over 20 years. Been over 20 years. Fighting game players in the current age cannot go 20 minutes without talking about a patch, some sort of adjustment, or something that needs to be balanced or removed out of the game. A perfect example, unfortunately, is the most recent Tekken patch. People cried and cried and cried about Azucena and her broken, her completely overtuned, her ridiculous wall-running 3-2. I also kind of agree that it was overtuned. It wasn't fun to play against, kind of a really scrubby, obnoxious button, especially with how strong wall-rising moves are and how easy they are in comparison to previous Tekken entries. But what they did for us was they decided to nerf wall-running 3-2 by making it so that instead of the second hit coming out, which is the reason why it retracts, the move just would not come out unless you connected with an opponent's hurt box after the wall running 3. So 3-2 was basically an OS. If you hit them, if they got hit or they blocked it, wall running 3-2 would come out. If they didn't, then you would just do wall running 3, and your momentum would carry. Now your momentum carries further, and you are harder to punish as the Azucena player because the next hit didn't come out, stopping your momentum and putting you closer to your opponent. This change happened, and a lot of people are upset about it. They're like, this feels stupid. This is way worse than it was before. Change it back. And this change is hated. And it's funny that if it never happened, people would not be complaining about it, because sometimes there are just things in games that are overtuned or strong, and they are meant to be. The only thing that you can do about them is learn how to beat them and adjust to them. Tons of things in fighting games, tons of things in gaming in general, are meant to be strong. You can even think of a game like League of Legends, where every 6 months, the best characters and the best champions in the game, which there's over 150, are replaced by the next set of ridiculous characters for the next season. They shuffle who the top tiers are every season or so. Sometimes there's outliers who stay really strong for multiple seasons, and generally that gets very stale or boring, whatever, vice versa, but that's kind of the MO. People being able to see different characters on screen at a high level of play. For fighting game players, the real outcry is balance. And the real outcry is for a perfect patch, a perfect version of the game. And the biggest issue with that is, the patch that could be perfect for you could be an absolute disaster for someone else. And I say that because where the Solomel is in Soul Calibur 6, at the end of its lifespan, it's no longer being supported, I think is one of the best versions of the Solomel to ever exist in Soul Calibur 6. His buttons feel as good as ever. He's got tons of options and ways to open the opponent up while remaining relatively safe. This could be someone's least favorite version of this character. People could be like, what the fuck did they do to my man? He is jacked. Brother, I hate fighting against this guy, or vice versa. He feels too easy to win with now. That could be the case across multiple people, across multiple characters, across multiple games. That sentiment is impossible to get rid of. You cannot create a perfectly balanced fighting game. It is impossible. There's ways to remove some stupid tools from strong characters, but then the next character just becomes the best character. Or the next, say you move 3 characters down, the 4th character becomes the best character. But not only that, it's not only that the 4th character, the 5th character becomes the new best character. It's that when you do that, the sentiment changes. And instead of now saying, hey, like, maybe buff our characters, they're like, nerf that guy now. That guy at the top, he's at the fucking top of the mountain. Nerf him now. There are the people who say that we should just buff characters to match some sort of bar, set a bar, and try to match as many characters to that as possible, so that the only thing that really matters is matchups. But then that makes characters feel samey and uniform and like they lack personality. Perfect example, Tekken 7. There was a bunch of characters in Tekken 7 that did not have 15 frame launchers. It was just a character trait. They didn't have it. They were real quirky for that. But because of that, they had other things in their arsenal that they were better at. Someone like Anna, for a long time, if I'm not mistaken, did not have a 15 frame launcher because she's a walking 50-50. She could mix you off so many buttons. She had good safe mids and unsafe lows, but the unsafe lows were launchers. So it was just something that she did. It was just in her toolkit that no matter where she was, if she was in range 1 or closer, she was a mix-up. Because of that, they decided if they gave her a 15 frame launcher, she might be a little too powerful. So she didn't have one for a very long time. I think towards the tail end of Tekken 7, they gave her and a few other characters, including Bob, 15 frame launchers when previously they never had them. And it was a complaint amongst the community that they felt as if now these characters were being homogenized and being made to play the same as other characters in Tekken, when their identity became partly that they didn't have a launch at 15 frames. With the buff the weak mentality, we would want them to have 15 frame launchers so everyone has them, right? But then we only think about that in a vacuum and don't think about the other things that come along with it that give characters their own depth when it comes to their strengths and weaknesses. What do I think? I've seen too much complaining in Mortal Kombat 1 about the best cameos and the best characters and them immediately being nerfed. Injustice 2, the best characters in the game, how to nerf them and then them just being deleted from the game. Street Fighter 6 is probably the only modern fighting game as of late that has not kneecapped anyone it's nerfed. Oh wait, I can't say that. Yeah, I can. Because Guilty Gear Strive kneecapped Zato, huh? Guilty Gear Strive shot Zato. He's dead. Major nerfs for characters feels bad, but major buffs for characters feels good. But those feelings of Rising hasn't kneecapped anyone, not yet. You're right. Yeah, actually, that was something people complained about the Rising patch. Is the top tiers weren't changed enough. People complained that Nier needed to be nerfed even harder. And same with Vera, which I think is strange. I think that the logical thing to do is to let a game run its natural course and find out who's good and who's not. Yeah, same with Vera. I just said that. I know, all right? I know a little bit about some Grand Blue Rising. Don't you guys worry. I am a fan of letting games run their natural course and figuring out if something is too overtuned and too powerful before you take action. It took a long time for DNF Duel to nerf the strongest characters in the game, that being Hitman and Swiftmaster. Now, do I think that they waited a little too long? Maybe. Yeah, I do, actually. Like, maybe wait 5-6 months next time, instead of waiting a full fucking year almost. But they let those characters run their natural course to see if they were really the strongest things to exist in the game, and if there was anything that was meta-defining that could stop them. It unfortunately pushes players away from games because they feel like they need that dopamine hit of a new patch, of new changes for their character, new system mechanics, every few months. And that's how we end up with shitty patches like this one for Tekken 8. That's how we end up with bugs and glitches and shitty things that happen in Mortal Kombat 1, outside of bad R&D, but whatever. And that's how we end up with funny, but not so funny, changes like the ones that happened in the Street Fighter 6 patch. Not wanting to change enough about a character and instead pulling it back, right? Instead of pissing off the players, let's pull it back. Let's nerf the top 3 characters, but in such a way that they almost completely remain the top 3. I don't know about Tekken 8. They patched it because they admit they're not done working on the game. There's no way. It's one of those games. It's one of the games that needed its arcade releases to become perfect, to become good. Tekken 7, and I still don't think Tekken 7 was good on release. There was a certain thing that Jack, I can't remember exactly what it was, but Jack had some crazy shit he could do in the arcade version of Tekken 7 that we never saw on console. The first release of Jack on Tekken 7 in the arcades was fucked up. He was a fucked up character. And we didn't have to deal with that. But and home consoles we do. Right, you've already paid your $70, so like expecting the game not to change for better or for worse really is shitty. It sucks. But it also feels worse whenever they change something too egregiously and people complain, or not enough and people complain. I'm of the mindset that the less things change, the better. Because it gives players time to develop strategies to beat the best things in the game, or to start using the best things in the game. Because crying about them doesn't do anything to progress your own growth as a player. That's just how I feel. I hate certain aspects of some characters in fighting games, especially when they're new. I couldn't fucking stand 2B on launch for Soul Calibur 6. Dude, I still don't fucking like Dragunov or Azucena. I still think they're too overtuned. But I don't constantly complain about them, because it doesn't change how good I am at the matchup and how I can learn and adapt to play against these characters. It doesn't change that. Do I think they could be changed? Sure. If we're going to be getting patches, I know we're getting patches yet. Hey, guys, can you guys adjust these characters if we're going to worry about any characters? Yeah, no, and it's not that they waited a full year, because they're quick to act on things that are legitimately problems. Like the Rashid bug, Chun-Li's fireballs being faster in Modern, certain Modern inputs literally just being broken, like certain things Guile could do with Modern. They acted on those. So they were not opposed to fixing problems with the game. But they didn't want to adjust, especially not too heavy, balance of the game. Because it's always smarter to let the player base develop and find out what actually is good and what is bad, instead of shifting things around constantly. Patch culture, at least in fighting games, really ruins a lot of the expressiveness and creativity of these long game characters. A perfect example is a character like Quan Chi in Mortal Kombat X, or a character like Cyrax in MK9, in games that actively had patches, and even to a certain degree, MKX had very fast patches. Very fast patches. These were long game characters, where they had amazing sequences, and frame traps, and pressure sequences, and Oki that you could really lab out, and like become proficient at, and do really dastardly, fucked up, diabolical things to your opponent. And whenever they nerfed them, those characters were weak for the remainder of the patch, generally, except for Cyrax had an issue, and I'll explain that in a bit. But Quan Chi would get significantly weaker every time until at some point they completely kneecapped him, because all of that stuff has to be relearned as you're adjusting characters, making them stronger, making them weaker, giving them new armor, giving them new poke-out tools. These long game characters get so much worse. So it makes those characters that are really simple but good generally end up being really strong. Dragunov, Azucena. Because these characters, because they're really strong and really simple, they're easier to gravitate to in fast patch games. Now, a character like Cyrax, on the other hand, Cyrax had a nickname back in the day when it came to Mortal Kombat 9. Do you guys know what that nickname was? His nickname was the Leaky Boat, because constantly they were trying to patch and duct tape and glue this motherfucker's fucked up resets any chance they could. And when they did, players would just find another one. This character had so much depth, so much creativity to him, that they could not properly nerf the way they wanted him to function. They were like, well, we don't want to make bombs blockable, so we're going to leave bombs unblockable, we're going to adjust the timing of this, we're going to change the knockdown timing of this, and we're going to add more recovery to this. And then the Cyrax community would go, hold my beer and watch me make a new reset. That's even more fucked up. And that happened for the entirety of the game being patched. They removed a sequence where you could bait someone's breaker and do 80%, and changed it on accident to a situation where if someone broke you, you could get 95% at some point. And then it got nerfed again, and it became like a 60 or 40, I think it was like 65 or 55 damage off of, with meter, making someone's breaker width. Like you would, they would do their breaker, but you'd already thrown out the bomb, so the bomb would blow up right as they broke. Then you would throw net, and then you would teleport to them and do a full combo. And the first time they tried to fix it, when he did like 75%, he went closer to doing 90% with meter. That's what happens when you're rapidly patching a game without really understanding what you're trying to fix. It's like being a carpenter without having any knowledge of how to use a hammer and where the fucking nails go. And I think that resonates even more with the large outcry of players on social media, right? Like, we need running 3-2 nerfed. Running 3-2 so stupid. And then everyone puts their hat in the ring of how to nerf said move. Now, I'm not saying developers are dumb, but they might be a little stupid if they listen to the outcry of their community and also listen to how the community wants the game balanced. That might be a bad idea. Like if someone was like, Dragon House Hatchet Kick is too broken, make it -20. Maybe that's fucking dumb. Maybe, yeah, probably just a bit. But if they're like, oh, you know what, maybe it should be more punishable. -13 is not enough. Reasonably, let's make it -15. I think it's -14 right now or something. I think Brian's is the only one that's -13. But you understand what I'm getting at, right? Listening to your community to balance your game is detrimental, generally. Because players are not developers and have all sorts of terrible, wild ideas of what is broken, what is good, what needs to be balanced, what needs to be nerfed, and what needs to be buffed. I've heard people say, specifically, that Kazuya is low tier. And I've heard other people say that Kazuya is probably the best Mishima. Which one is it? Do we buff him because he's the weakest Mishima? Or do we nerf him because people just said that he's the best Mishima outside of Devil Jin? What do we do? What happens now? Constant changes to a game only create a player base that feels and becomes entitled to patches, changing things that they don't want to adjust to, or they don't want to learn how to beat. If you ask me, I think frequent patching is really unhealthy, especially when it comes to games that are supposed to be so skill expressive in fighting games. I think we could do a shorter patch cycle, a bigger patch cycles. 6 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, right? Big patch cycles like that where at least we understand that a patch is coming. They could tell us in advance, hey, we're doing 6-month patch cycles. And so we know in advance, alright, well, I've done everything I could to try to learn how to beat this character. It's month 5. Bro, I fucking give up. A month from now, this might have changed. The issue with that is sometimes it won't. And when it doesn't, that giant outcry exists all over again. Or something changes. And it breaks something else. Or makes something else more prevalent and more powerful that you hate even more. Patching is the great evil and the great help of the modern era of gaming. Whether that be for fighting games or really any multiplayer game. Tell me how you feel about frequent patching, and if you think that frequent patching has made a softer player base overall. For all multiplayer games, not just fighting games. Leave it down below in the comment section. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these sorts of rants and talk segments. I actually lost subscribers over the weekend. I don't know what I did. Give them back to me. Show up. We're hoping to get to 1,000 at some point. That'd be really cool. And if you guys like these talk segments and want to watch them live, hit up the Twitch channel. Same name. Anyways, this has been Beanie Thuggish for the YouTubes, talking about frequent patching in multiplayer games, specifically fighting games. How I feel about it. Signing out and saying, peace.